Hi, Pollywogs. It's Brendan. Most parents tell stories of their childhood to their children, like how Bandit did in Bluey. And my mom also tells me her stories. And these stories tend to be quite wild. For context, the entirety of her childhood, she lived in a village in rural China. And how she colors her childhood is most comparable to reality TV. From eloping cheaters, two-faced old people, and people who shouldn't marry at all. She's seen it all. As you've probably guessed by now, this video is about one of those stories from her childhood, which she'd been more than happy to share. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. This episode is called My Mom's Crazy Neighbor. One day, my mom's neighbor came over to my mom's with a bag of ice cream. Why did she bring that bag of ice cream? Because she wanted to use my mom's family refrigerator to store them. The neighbor had an empty refrigerator that they could have used to store their own ice cream, but they refused to store anything in it because
every time we open the fridge, it costs 5 cents.
So based on that logic, they decided that the best way to save money was to put the burden on everyone else. So every time they had something to refrigerate, they stored it in their neighbors' refrigerators instead. And on top of that, these neighbors were considered to be the rich folk in town. You see, at the time, most people in my parents' village lived in single-story houses. But these crazy neighbors, their house was 2 stories tall, which most people in the village couldn't afford. In addition, all 4 of their sons worked abroad in the United States. Side note, their children were born before the one-child policy in China. During that period, China, and especially the part my parents were from, didn't have much economic growth compared to the States. So having all your children work abroad was considered a big deal. Those who worked abroad also earned more than those who worked in China. Anyways, my grandmother agreed to store the neighbor's ice cream in her fridge, because she's a doormat. And that leads to the next part of this story, when my mom was searching the fridge for snacks, which kids apparently do. Laying her eyes on the bag of ice cream, she grabbed one for herself, assuming that her parents bought the ice cream for her family to enjoy. Which is a fair assumption to make, seeing as the ice cream was in her family's fridge. And no one told her she couldn't eat the ice cream, so she finished it, and after an indeterminate amount of time later, grabbed yet another one, and shared it with one of her friends. At this point, the neighbors saw my mom eating the ice cream and recognized it as theirs. Somehow, they immediately knew that my grandparents didn't buy the ice cream and that my mom was eating their ice cream. So as the mature adults in this situation, the neighbors screamed,
"How dare you eat my ice cream?"
This accusation confused my mom, seeing as the ice cream was found in her own family's fridge. As the neighbor maintained the ice cream in my mother's hand was theirs, my mom still couldn't piece together how their ice cream could have ended up in her family's fridge. And once it's cleared up that the neighbor put their ice cream in my mom's fridge, they asked them,
为什么你的冰棒会在我的冰箱里？
And the neighbor responded,
"Don't you know it costs me 5 cents every time I open my fridge? Why wouldn't I put my ice cream in your fridge to save money?"
Then my mom, the cheeky little kid, shot back with,
凡是在我家冰箱的，那就都是我的，所以我吃的是我自己的冰棒。
Angered by my mom, the neighbor took their ice cream out of my grandparents' fridge and left, throwing a tantrum along the way. As old Chinese women do, the neighbor told everyone they could that my mom ate their ice cream and that she's gonna make her pay. And so my mom concluded that this neighbor must be crazy. I don't think this neighbor will be someone I like to live near. I mean, they sound like a leech treating their peers as a resource, even though they have more resources. But they probably aren't that bad, right? This did happen a long time ago, so some details probably got lost to time. And this neighbor probably isn't like this all the time. But I never met this neighbor, so who knows? Anyways, thank you for watching. The video's not over? Blah 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 blah. It's not even halfway done?
Meow 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 meow.
Wait, this story's not over yet? Sorry for the interruption. Continue. After that incident with my mom, they decided to only store food that cannot be eaten immediately. Why wouldn't they? It's not like they couldn't just store their food in their own fridge or anything. My mom, being the little rascal she was, foiled their attempt. In her mind, these neighbors were the bad people.
自己的冰箱开一下要钱，别人的就不用钱了吗？
And my mom's foils worked. The neighbors did take their stuff out of my mom's fridge and put it somewhere else. And if you thought the neighbor came to their senses and used their own fridge, you'd be wrong. The neighbor took their stuff and stored it in another neighbor's fridge. They didn't even ask the head of that neighbor's household for permission. Instead, they pressured the newlywed wife of that household's son into putting their stuff into the fridge. The newlywed, unable to say no, agreed. This led to a situation that was really cathartic for my mom. The matriarch of that family, looking to save money on electricity, decided to unplug the refrigerator. Why did she do this? Because she assumed that there was no food stored inside it, not knowing that her daughter-in-law was pressured to put their neighbor's food inside. So when that neighbor came over to their house to cash in the food, they found all of their stuff rotten in the fridge. The neighbor demanded to know what happened to the food, yet all the newlywed was able to muster was that she put the food in the fridge and forgot about it. This confused the matriarch, seeing as she thought the fridge was empty when she unplugged it a few days ago. Pause. It's kinda annoying to refer to my mom's neighbor as the neighbor, so I'll just call them something else. Since my mom never gave a name to this neighbor, I'll just have to give them a fake one. My mom says this neighbor's a woman. What's a good name for an entitled, stingy woman? Oh yeah, this neighbor's gonna be called Karen from now on. Unpause. Enraged by the refrigerator being unplugged, Karen demanded to be paid compensation for ruining her food. This, in turn, frustrated her victims. After all, if Karen bothered to use her own fridge, none of this would have happened. The end. Hi, it's me from editing. After 2 speed paints, I noticed these speed paints take up a lot of space. So I'm not gonna use speed paints from now on. But hey, here are the 2 drawings I did on the speed paints. Anyways, let's continue to the main program. And that's the cathartic end to this story. Some people, like my mom, may say this woman got what she deserved, but personally, I don't know what to think. I guess my takeaway from this story is that Chinese people like to gossip. If they don't, how else did my mom know about her other neighbors rotting Karen's food? Using other people to store her food would already put Karen on the bad side of many. But this isn't the only stunt she performs. And now transition to the next story. This episode is called Produce Beggar. For context, my grandparents on my mom's side worked in agriculture. As such, they grew a lot of fruits and vegetables. At the time, the weather wasn't in the farmers' favor. As such, the farmers had lower yields, leading to produce becoming more expensive. So of course, Karen came to my grandparents, begging for free vegetables. She was expecting my grandma, who would immediately give Karen the free vegetables, because she was a doormat. But instead of my grandma, my mom greeted Karen by the door. Pause. The only clothes my mom had were school uniforms. Unpause. Karen assumed that my mom would be a doormat like my grandma, and as such, requested for a couple free vegetables. My mom, being the maliciously compliant child that she is, gave Karen only 2 pieces of vegetables. Karen, seeing as 2 pieces of vegetables aren't enough to make a meal, demanded to know why my mom didn't give her any more. My mom snarked,
你煮菜为什么不去买啊？
Karen shot back with,
Don't you know how expensive vegetables are these days?
and my mom countered,
我家的菜不要钱是吧？我们靠种菜生活卖钱。
and so Mom took back the 2 pieces of vegetables, with Karen declaring that she'll be back to ask my grandma for veggies instead. My mom, taking none of this, declared,
我菜烂掉给鸡吃，给鸭吃，我也不给你吃。我妈能从我手上拿到菜再说。
and so Karen left, declaring for the second time that she'd be back. That was dramatic. To recap, Karen is a rich person in town, and she's also a choosing beggar. On top of her treating everyone else as resources instead of people, it's no wonder my mom didn't like her. Who's pounding that while I'm recording? But hey, maybe there was a side to Karen that my mom didn't know about. A nicer side than the one mom remembers. But who knows? Side note, while writing the script, I noticed that at some parts it felt like a dramatic showdown. I am basing the script on an audio recording of my mom sharing these stories, so my mom is probably just a very dramatic person. And it looks like I still have some time left, so why not another story of my mom's neighbor being a choosing beggar? This episode is called Melon Kid. Vegetables aren't the only thing my grandparents grew. They also grew fruits. One of the fruits that they grew was watermelon. One year, my grandparents grew a lot of watermelon, but then disaster struck. Heavy rainfall poured from the sky, flooding the watermelon field. To cut their losses, my grandparents harvested all the watermelons they could save and stored them at home. So of course, Karen came over to demand a free watermelon, But since the adults weren't home to sell the watermelons, only my mom and her 2 siblings answered the door. And they shut the door on her. I think. My mom didn't tell us what happened to Karen. But whatever happened, in response, Karen sent her daughter to beg for watermelons instead. Let's call Karen's daughter Lizzie. My mom still wasn't having any of it and told Lizzie,
你让你妈妈给你买呀。
and in response, Lizzie told my mom that her mom told her to get the melons from my mom. My mom, seeing that Lizzie was just a child, reluctantly agreed to give her a watermelon. And not even a minute after Lizzie left, Karen came back to my mom, holding the free watermelon to complain that the free watermelon was too small, and that she wanted a larger one. My mom said,
想吃大的可以呀，你拿钱来买啊，我卖给你。
Karen gasped at the audacity of my mom to want payment for her produce, and declared,
I'll be back when your parents are home. Then we'll get that big watermelon for free.
Mom brushed her off as,
我们大的西瓜都是用来卖钱的。
then Karen left, returning when she's certain that my grandma was home. Surprising my mom, Karen and Lizzie actually came back to ask for a large watermelon from my grandma. And grandma agreed, because she's a doormat. Enraged by this, my mom did the only sensible thing that a child can come up with, and smashed the watermelon. My mom felt cathartic, once again foiling Karen's plot to get free produce. Lizzie's now crying because my mom smashed her watermelon, but my mom said,
这碎的是我的西瓜，你如果是花钱买了，那就是你的西瓜；你没有花钱买，是我的，那就是我的西瓜呀。
Lizzie continued crying, so my grandma gave them yet another large watermelon, which my mom also smashed. Then it looks like my mom insulted them in her retellings, so Karen took the crying Lizzie and they went home. Afterwards, Grandma scolded Mom. I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to feel about this one. Mom probably wasn't in the right there, but I'm not sure if she could have done anything better. I'll just leave it to the am I an a-hole people to debate about that, but I'm pretty sure my mom grew out of this phase. Hopefully. Well, it looks like our time is up, so this is the last story of the video. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Ring the notification bell to see any future videos, and if this video gets popular, I might make a part 2. Have a beautiful day and goodbye. Brendan out. Nice of you to stick around for the end card. And as usual, here's my beautiful subscribers in the bottom left, or at least the ones YouTube shows me. Today we have Cubicat, Provec, and Vegerot. At the top right, we have my newest video. On the top left, my previous one. So if you want to hear about my troubles with apartment maintenance, check it out. But anyways, bye bye Pollywog!